Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora.
Today I'm interviewing Marty Kisliuk, and Marty has always been an innovator in supply chain. Marty, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Marty, tell the group a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I am a recently semi-retired operations executive. I've spent 40 years in the agrochemical industry. In the chemical industry, I maintain an advisory service, and I find this subject critical to operations organizations. And I stay in touch and I keep involved with some clients and with Lora because I think it's an important subject for operations and companies.
Well, Marty, and you were kind enough to attend our last Global Summit. What were your takeaways as you think about where supply chain is and where it needs to be and the subject of digitalization and driving digital innovation?
Well, that's a big subject. I'll keep it in short pieces if I can. There were a lot of, I call ahas at this conference with this group of people. The first one was how, I guess the word is stuck. Most companies are. Change is slow and has been slow. Is remarkable is the technologies that I've found available that it's very hard for companies to move forward. I also noticed there's a frustration with myself, but as well with others, a frustration between technologists and business leaders. I think there's an amazing amount of technology on the forefront. There's some technology that's been around for a long time, and I think there's a gap between the collaboration of technologists and business people. And I've learned I learned something. Lastly, I learned something interesting about how to perceive this is this interface of human beings and technology. And I think the crux of our issue is with that adaptation, that augmenting humans with data and information and technologies.
So, Marty, what does that mean to people listening? How do you overcome that gap?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'm not sure we're going to overcome with a great stroke of action. One is there's a leadership subject both in an operations and an enterprise level, and I separate those two, that I think is a little bit rate limiting. We are competing with capital. We are competing for capital, and in this transformation. And I also think that we're struggling with communicating how an enterprise can be enhanced, and that means that laying out a plan, a vision for transformation and how those outcomes enhance enterprises and businesses is a struggle. And I think the first and foremost is we need to look at that and say, good plans, persuasive arguments, understanding your businesses, laying out a big enough picture that people can understand and that we can actually compete for capital of the enterprise. That's first.
So, Marty, why does that tension exist? Why is there not more focus on process innovation, technology innovation? I mean, look at how much it's changed our personal lives. Why are we dragging our feet in the business world?
Well, I've spent 40 years in industry, and it's been a fascinating 40 years. But I grew up in a time of, I would call it functional focus. Organizations and leaders of today, which would be my age, maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older, but in general, functional excellence and being functionally competent and having your organization in pieces and dealing with those pieces has been the history of our leaders today. I think the generation that's coming, that's already in business, but not at the high leadership level yet, have a different view. They didn't grow up in the functional excellence arena. They're probably looking at global enterprises, greater speed of change, less defensiveness, more surprises in the world, And I think they're going to come up with a different view. So I think my generation of leadership is stuck. And I think the functional operations people, for which I find there to be a dearth of talent and skill and insight, are struggling because they've also the leaders of those functional organizations have come up in the world of functional excellence. And I don't think that's where data-driven and where digital transformation is taking enterprises. It requires a greater vision, a broader concept, more enterprise level operations change.
So what do we do about it?
Well, I usually think there's nothing short of tough work, but I would say to a couple of groups of people. I would say to operations like people, enterprise business leaders, I would say step back and make cases for outcomes that are important to your business. Strategy development. The other thing I would say to technologists, I would say go grab yourself some operational people, and operational people go grab yourself some technologists. And there's really good data scientists and really innovative people with technology visions, and sit down and collaborate. And I think this conference, Supply Chain Insight Summit this year, was the beginning of that kind of sit down with some technologists and look at each other and say, how do we communicate? How do we put this together and make a leap in this digital arena, this adoption of digital technologies that change how humans interface with machines and data? And I think so. It's a piece of operation technologists, and it's a piece of information technology technologists. Sit down and come together more often and more clearly, and then put yourself in front of some executives, some enlightened leadership, and move forward.
But you've worked in the real world, Marty. Where you go from meeting to meeting, and the technology companies come with pretty PowerPoints, and the IT guys want you to focus on IT standardization, and projects are long and sometimes they don't work. How do you reverse that?
I don't think it's a reversing. I think it's a different perspective. And if we aren't going to change, if this is going to continue to stall for another, let's call it decade, and I really mean decade or so, I think you're going to have a generation that is going to demand it. I think you're going to begin to see people not go to companies that aren't moving themselves forward. I think enterprises are going to start. I think brilliant people out there, the young people out there, the educated that are looking to come into industries are going to start starving some of the stalwarts. So I think it's going to happen anyway. But inside of companies, they're struggling. Even at this conference, I learned that for the most part, they're going backwards a little bit. And my experience says, my observation says, the stalling is, and going backwards in terms of the metrics is a result of more complex business environments, and a lesson that the world is moving faster than we're adopting these technologies.
Very true. So what was your biggest insight, in terms of cool technologies or new approaches? I mean, you were always an innovator when you were at FMC, but, you kind of stepped back. You hadn't been in this conference in 2 years. What really excited you?
What excited me was there was a group of people and leaders who actually are cognizant of the fact that we aren't moving as fast as we need to. I also saw several companies, and I'm always looking at other companies and other industries. Being in the chemical industry, I don't find it to be very mature in this arena, and I knew that long ago. And I always had to look outside of the industry and to see who's making things happen, who's really doing it right. And this time I saw a few companies who really are moving ahead. In fact, I think some companies with scale and some real leaders Now, I mean their leaders and owners, and I mean their operational leaders, are putting together bold plans and making large step changes. So there are people in industries who are moving at the pace they need to move, and I would go look at them as other industries and other companies and say, what are they doing right? Why are they leading? Why are they doing these things? And I always looked at that and I say, and I admire them and try to adopt that. Now, it's hard, not easy to sell somebody in your industry on a different industry's approach. But I do find that to be really, really insightful from this meeting. The people I saw there are ready to take bold steps, and I think they can help each other as much as people from the outside can help. And I also think that some of these leading companies who got awards at this conference, and some of the leading companies who are doing some bigger and innovative things can really help others. So we have to look outside of ourselves to see who's doing what's good. And they're very similar. So it's not like you're looking outside and you're struggling to figure out how it applies to your own company, because most of the people I met at the conference are very cognizant of that industry or that company in that industry are really doing things that apply perfectly to the issues of your own enterprise.
Well, Marty, we're going to have to wrap it up. I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us today. This is Lora interviewing Marty Kisliuk with Supply Chain Insights, Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. Thank you, Marty.
Thank you, Laura. I like being with you and talking with you about this stuff.
Me too. Bye now.